Good evening, Danvers. This is Dan Bennett, Chair of the Danvers Select Board. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's Executive Order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. The order, which you can find in the remote meetings page of the town website, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the meeting. For this meeting, the Select Board is convening remotely via the Microsoft's Team app. Members of the public who wish to participate under new public business or as part of the advertised public business were instructed on how to do so on the agenda itself. This required pre-registration. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present. Fellow board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Maureen Bernard?
Here.
Bill Clark?
Yes.
David Mills?
Yes.
Gardner Trask?
Yes.
The board is joined tonight by the following staff members. Please answer here when I call your name. Town Manager Steve Bartha.
Yes.
Assistant Town Manager Jen Breaker.
Yes.
Town Clerk Kathy Ellsworth.
Here.
Director of Administration Finance Rodney Conley.
Here.
Town Accountant Heather Varney.
Here.
Treasurer Collector Jill Summit.
Here.
Director of Land Use Community Services Aaron Henry.
Here.
Thank you. Anticipated guest speakers on the agenda tonight include agenda item 3, Tom Powers, Rail Trail Committee candidate. Are you here?
Here.
Thank you, Tom. Agenda 5, Anthony Bartoli, CEO of Village Motors North. Anthony, are you here?
He is here, Dan, and I'm trying to help unmute him. I can see that he's
I'm
on.
here.
There we go.
Thank you, sir.
Here.
Agenda item 6 from the town audits firm, Melanson, Scott McIntyre, principal,
Here.
and Zach Fentros, manager.
Here.
Members of the public were asked to register in advance for the meeting, and none did so. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda and materials. Before we turn to the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude the remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to excuse me. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. On your screen, you'll see a small hand icon. Clicking this will send a visual message to me and other members that you wish to speak. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, the meeting agenda included instructions for members of the public wishing to participate, and they did. Under new public business or during public hearings, clicking the hand icon will signal to me that you wish to speak. Again, nobody signed up. You can watch this tonight on Channel 22 Comcast, Channel 41 Verizon, or online www.danversmass.gov/remote-meetings/. Please note there is roughly a 20-second sound delay on remote meeting is being broadcast. So at this time, I would like to ask Select Board Member Maureen Bernard to lead us in the pledge. Do we have a flag, Jen? Yes, Jim, thank you. All rise, Maureen.
Yes, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the
of
United
the
States
United States of America,
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for
for
which
which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
with liberty,
with liberty and
justice.
justice for all.
For all. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you.
So at this time, I would like to ask for a moment of silence in memory of past former police chief Pat Ambrose. Thank you all. Select board members, if you would like to make comment on the chief now or at the end of the meeting, your choice. Gardner,
I'll wait for my closing comments. Thank you.
thank you. Bill,
I'll wait till my closing comments. Thank you.
thank you. Maureen,
I'll also wait. Thank you.
David,
Thank you, Dan. I will wait as well.
thank you all, thank you. So can we have approval of the minutes of December 15th, 2020?
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
And that's Gardner,
Trask.
yes, second.
Second, Mills.
Bill Clark, thank you. In favor, David,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes,
the chair as well, thank you. New public business, there was nobody pre-registered, so I don't think there's anyone for new public business. So we'll go right to number 3, and introduction of the new Rail Trail Committee member, Mr. Bartha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have Tom Powers on the call tonight.
Welcome, Tom.
Tom is a frequent user of the trail and a supporter of the trail, and we have a vacancy on this committee after a longtime member, Lori DuPont, resigned. So Tom comes with great recommendations, and he joined the call tonight to introduce himself to the board.
Welcome, Tom. Any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, simply, guys, I've lived in Danvers over 40 years. I have a deep affection for the town. I moved when I was a middle schooler, right through my college years, moved out of state for my career, came back in the 90s. I love the town. I'm very focused on physical fitness, and I just embraced this rail trail when it was open. And when I retired, I reached out to Paul McNulty and wanted to volunteer. I spent a considerable amount of time last year with the team. Great team, by the way. And when this opening came up, I thought I could contribute even some more to the town. Just my effort to help the town.
So, Tom, thank you for coming tonight. We'd like to speak to and see members when they join a committee. Although I think most all the members on this board know you. We're happy to have you as a Rail Trail Committee member, and good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Barth, you don't need a motion, do you? This is your appointment?
It is my appointment, and I will just say we'll make good use of Tom with the very exciting expansion that's planned for the spring as we start to use the MassWorks grant to develop the trail westward toward Middleton. So there will be lots to do in the months and years ahead. So thank you, Tom, for joining the committee.
All right, board members, any comments?
Can I say something? Hi, Tom.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Maureen Bernard. I just want to say thank you very much. I've known Tom for, I don't know, Tom, 35 years through various clubs and organizations, a lot of fundraising. It's definitely a great asset to the Rail Trail Committee. I look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I also want to welcome you, Tom, and seems like a natural fit with all you do in town. So thank you very much for your community spirit.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'd like to, Bill.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom. Thank you very much for volunteering. You are the epitome of the kind of resident we'd like to have to get on these committees, and we're fortunate to have someone with your ability, background, and motivation to be on that committee. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
David, any comment?
Thank you, Dan. Tom, I don't know you, but boy, have you got a wonderful pedigree and reputation, and thank you for your generosity and being willing to serve. And that is a great committee, so I hope you'll have lots of fun.
Thank you.
Again, Tom, thanks for joining us. The board will now vote to accept a gift to the Danvers Police Department to benefit the DARE program in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You received materials in your packets. The town received a very generous gift from Terry and Mike Morris in the amount of $1,000 to the police department, and instructed the department to use those funds wherever they were most needed, and they will be received and deposited into our DARE program account for the drug awareness program in the school. So longtime residents, a very generous gift to the police department from the Morrises.
Thank you. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Clark,
Yes,
I
Bill.
make a motion that we accept the gift under Chapter 44, Paragraph 53 of Mass General Laws.
Second the motion.
Second.
Okay, in a second,
Gardner, yep.
and to send the appropriate thank you letter?
Yes.
Thank you. Maureen?
Thank you very much. That was very thoughtful of Terry and Mike Morris. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. We'll take the vote now. Maureen?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
Dan? Yes. And I have the letter here. I just signed it. We're all set. Thank you. Number 5, a public hearing will be held on the application of Village Motors North DBA GMC Danvers 8084 High Street, Anthony Bartoli, Chief Operating Officer, for the transfer of a Class 1 dealer's license at that location. This location previously had a Class 1 dealer's license by Moore GMC Truck Inc., DBA Moore GMC Truck. Is there somebody here to speak to this?
Hi, I'm Anthony Bartolotti.
Welcome.
Thank you. I am the COO of Village Motors North, and Mr. Moore is retiring, and we're trying to buy we're buying his GMC store, and hopefully continue it for a long time.
The town clerk, is everything in order?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So this is a transfer of license, but you haven't bought the business yet?
No, we did buy the business. We officially close, I think, beginning of next week.
Okay, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, questions? David?
No, thank you, Dan, except I want it to be known that I bought a used Pontiac there from George Dodge in 1958. So I know the inside of that building well. Good luck. You got a great day.
Bill?
Thank you very much. I don't want to talk David, but I bought a used pickup truck from Mr. Moore back about 1975. It was a great family business, and I hope you continue that tradition, Mr. Bartoloni. Thank you.
Maureen?
Hi, I'm Maureen Bernard. Thank you. The Moore family has been a great family in the town of Danvers. Thank you, and I'm sure wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Gardner?
I can't keep up with Bill or David. I did buy a raffle ticket for Kiwanis from Bob Moore. But we wish him luck in his retirement, and good luck to you as well in keeping the business going.
Thank you so much.
All right, this is a public hearing, and no one contacted us to be heard. So can I have a motion to close?
Move to close, Gardner.
Second?
Second, Bill.
Thank you. To close the public hearing, in favor? Maureen?
Aye.
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
And the chair as well. Thank you. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the application as presented. Trask.
Second, Clark.
Thank you. The motion is made and seconded. There's no further discussion. All in favor or opposed? Maureen?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And the chair as well. Thank you. Good luck, Mr. Bartoli.
Thank you guys very much.
I'll come in and see you. Maybe I'll buy a car and keep up with my fellow select board.
I
do a lot more than
hope-
anybody.
I hope you all come. Absolutely. Yeah.
Very good. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
The board will hear the fiscal year 2020 audit report by the town's independent auditor. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have quite a team on the call tonight for this next agenda item. The audit for the year ending June 30, 2020. You mentioned at the beginning of the call, we have Scott McIntyre and Zach Fentros with us from Alanson. We also have our Director of Finance and Administration, Rodney Conley, our Town Accountant, Heather Varney, and our Treasurer Collector, Jill Summit, on the call. There are a lot more hands involved with pulling an audit together, but the finance team on the call tonight is ultimately responsible for making sure that all the pieces fit. So I will
Make a comment. This is the first audit without Joe Collins.
This is the first audit without Joe Collins since well before Mr. Clark bought his pickup truck from GMC Moore. And it was a year. The last 3 months of the year covered the first 3 months of the pandemic. So some of the headwinds that we're dealing with now started to appear just at the end of this fiscal year. But as was noted in the email earlier today, it was a clean audit. And with that, I'll turn it over to either Rodney or Zach, whoever would like to kick things off, or Scott.
I'll defer
Rodney,
to, I
you
think
wanna-
Zach Fentros will be leading the presentation, and then we're here to available to answer any questions as they come up.
Rodney, that's you speaking?
Correct, that was Rodney
Thank
Conley.
you, Rodney
And
Conley.
maybe just as a point of reference, Mr. Chair, before we dive in, you have hard copies of the audit. Anybody who happens to be watching the meeting tonight can find the same documents that we're referring to on the website, and I believe it's going to be either on our finance webpage or on the finance committee webpage. Rodney, is that correct?
Under the finance section, under the CAFR subheading, you'll find it. Yep.
Excellent, thank you.
This is Zach Fentros speaking. I was the audit manager for the town of Danvers June 30, 2020 audit. I'm going to go through the financial statements tonight. I know that Mr. Bartha had mentioned that there was a copy available online. I'm going to be referring to some page numbers. I'm referring to the physical copy page numbers. For those folks that are reviewing this in a PDF format, it's just going to be a 10-page difference. So if I say we're on page 28, you're going to want to go to page 38 of the PDF. So it's just a plus 10 page difference between what I'm going to be saying for the paper for the paper version compared to the PDF version. So here tonight, I'm going to go through the town's comprehensive annual financial report, highlight some certain account balances, and then we'll go through the management letter. So I think before I jump in, I'd like to note that this audit was done entirely remotely, which is certainly rare for an audit. So we want to give a thank you to the entire staff that was involved in the audit for the town of Danvers. They had to do an exceptional amount more work this year compared to prior years. With scanning us quite a lot of documents where they used to hand them to us when we'd be on site for a week or two. So they really stepped up during the pandemic to ensure that we were all being safe and provided that information in a very timely manner to ensure that this was done before the December 31st deadline for CAFR. If I could, I'd like you to turn to page 13, where we'll find the independent auditor's report. So page 13 is the first page of the independent auditor's report, and this is essentially what the town of Danvers hired us to produce. The town received a clean opinion, which means that there are no exceptions, and this is the best opinion you can receive from an independent audit, and it is the same opinion that the town has received in prior years. Next, I'd actually like to jump to page 28, which is the statement of net position. So tonight we're going to be focusing on primarily pages 28 and 32. Page 28 is really a long-term view of the town's financial position, and page 28 is the long-term view of the town's financial position, and page 32 is more of the short-term view of the town's financial position. So we're going to start on page 28, and on page 28 there are 3 columns. The first column is your governmental activities, This is the town's general fund, stabilization funds, special revenues, capital projects, and they're all consolidated and presented into one column. And then the town's long-term assets and the town's long-term liabilities are included. That second column is your business type activities, and that is comprised of the town's water fund, the town's sewer fund, and the town's electric fund. And if you wanted to see a breakout for what makes up water, sewer, and electric, you could turn to page 37 and find that information there. I want to stay here on page 28, and we'll discuss some of the same things that that can be seen on further pages here on page 28. And I'd like to maybe start with maybe about 2/3 of the way down the page and focus on that governmental activities column, that very first column. Under liabilities, under non-current liabilities, the very first line I might want to bring to your attention is the net pension liability. That has a balance of $73,600,000. This is actually about a $5.9 million decrease from the prior year. Now, this liability represents the town's proportional share of the total unfunded liability for the Danvers contributory retirement system. And I had mentioned that it actually had decreased by about $5.9 million. Now, that decrease was primarily due to investment results in calendar year 2019. The Danvers contributory retirement system had investment income of approximately $10.8 million greater than what they had anticipated in calendar year 2019. And those positive investment results that came in greater than what was anticipated really led to this decrease in the liability that's presented here in the town's June 30, 2020 cash flows. That's the real reason you're going to see that decrease in that long-term liability for the town. The next line item I'd like to bring to your attention is actually right below that net pension liability, and it is net OPEB liability. And OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. This is essentially the health insurance, future health insurance liability associated with the town of Danvers. And it has a balance of $197,903,000. Now, this is actually about a $20 million increase from the prior year. Now, that increase is primarily due to a change in assumptions, a change in a particular assumption, to be more specific. And that assumption is the discount rate. In June 30, in your prior year financial statements for 2019, the discount rate was at 3.88%. Now, that decreased to 3.52% as of June 30, 2020. Now, that's a 0.3% decrease in that assumption. And I know that 0.36 doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually makes, I see that, Mr. Trask, you have a question. Mr. Chairman, would it be okay to take the question at this time?
Gardner?
Yeah, I wanted to let you finish your statement. Go ahead. You may answer my question if you finish your statement.
Okay. So a 1% change in that liability for the discount. So a 1% change in that discount rate for the liability is actually about a $43 million increase in that liability. So a 0.36% actually relates to about $15.8 or $16 million. So that was the primary reason for the increase in that liability, was again that change in the discount rate from 2019 to 2020.
So I guess my question is this uncommon across cities and towns that your firm audits?
It is common. We're seeing that certainly pretty much across the Commonwealth. If the discount rate is generally decreasing for OPEB liabilities that aren't going to be, that the OPEB trust fund is going to deplete over a period of time, we're seeing that decrease in that liability, in the decrease in the discount rate, and then the increase in that liability associated. So it's not uncommon. The town of Danvers is right in line with other communities in the Commonwealth.
Okay, because I noticed it wasn't in the management letter, the recommendations, and so there's no real lesson learned here.
I don't know necessarily if it would relate to a management letter, Mr. Trask. This is an actuarially determined liability, and it really relates to the market. So it's really based on the municipal bond rate, and that municipal bond rate is decreasing really due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So as that municipal bond rate decreases, you're seeing that liability increase, and that's pretty common across the Commonwealth. It's not necessarily something that the town of Danvers can control. Scott, I don't know if you want to jump in and maybe add to what I've said there.
I'll pick up on what you just said, Zach, that it's really driven by the municipal bond rate. I think as the select board knows, you have an OPEB trust at this point in time, which has a nice sum of money in there. However, Zach mentioned that there's a depletion analysis that the actuary goes through. And even with the handsome sum of funds you have in your OPEB trust funds, at some point in time in the future, I don't have that year right at my fingertips, the assets would deplete if you were using that trust to pay benefits. As a result, what the accounting standard requires you to use is a blended discount rate between the discount rate you could earn on your investments of, without looking it up in your CAFR, I'll say 7%. You have to blend that investment earning rate of 7% with the municipal bond rate. And as Zach was pointing out, after March of 2020, things in the market were very unfavorable. And through June 30, 2020, the municipal bond rate was in the 2% range. And that really drove the blended rate down significantly from the prior year. So it really was a lot of events that were beyond the control of the town of Danvers, and something we're seeing really throughout the Commonwealth. I had a meeting this morning with a similar group, and they asked a very similar question when the assumed rate of return was about 3/4 of a percentage point less than the prior year. So it's very consistent throughout the Commonwealth.
So if I may, a question for Rodney, are we not using a 7.5% investment rate?
So we have two areas liabilities where we use the assumed rate of return. For the pension side, we're still using that 7.5%.
Okay.
We're calculating the OPEB, as Scott and Zach mentioned. It's calculated based on how much money do we have in the trust, how quickly would we burn through that, and at that point it reverts to the municipal bond rate, which, again, when we're borrowing money for the Smith School, it's great to get that low rate, but when we're calculating our liability, that's where we pay for it. So
I just wanted the folks at home to know that it's 7.5, not 7.
It's 7 1/4.
7 1/4.
Yes.
Last question.
That's not on the pension side, though.
No, that's on the OPEB side. So OPEB's at 7 1/4, pension's at 7 1/2.
So the close to $8 million in the trust is earning about 7 1/4, we're projecting.
And one last question to you, Mr. Chairman, to either Steve or Rodney. I'm assuming we're going to take this into account when we factor in the discount rate for our upcoming budget season.
So I would put a non-actuarial spin on everything that was just said, and it's that the assets we have under control. So the assets we have invested on the pension side represent close to 60% of our liability. So we're assuming an investment return on those assets of 7.5% right now. We'd like to bring that assumption down a little bit. On the flip side of that, as was indicated, our unfunded ratio on the OPEB side is significantly higher, so the majority of our liability there is tied to the municipal bond market and not to investment returns. And so whereas we're doing really, really well right now when we're bonding capital projects long-term, that same phenomenon is what is tied to our OPEB liability. So as the interest rates start to climb on municipal bonds, we will be paying more for our capital projects, but we will actually see our OPEB liability improve, which is it's sort of counterintuitive, but there's an interplay there that goes both directions.
Thank you.
You all set, Gardner?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach, continue, please.
Thank you. Just to kind of put a little bit of a bow on it, the OPEB liability is actually at 3.4% funded of that total liability. So you can see that difference between pension and OPEB. I think Steve had mentioned that it was at about 60% for pension, and OPEB's at about 3.4% funded.
Thank you.
That's everything I wanted to talk about on page 28. If I could, I'd like to have you turn to page 32. And page 32 is your governmental funds balance sheet. So as page 28 was the long-term financial view, page 32 is the short-term financial view for the town of Danvers. And there are 4 columns here. The first one is your general, which is comprised of your general fund plus your stabilization funds. That second column is your major capital project fund. And then the third column is your non-major governmental funds, which is the consolidation of your special revenue funds and your trust funds. And then that final column is just a summation of the 3 prior columns. I'd like to focus our attention on that very first column, that general column for the general fund. And the first number I'd like to bring to your attention is actually 3 numbers from the top. It's under receivables and it's property tax receivables. And that is a balance of $3,026,000. This is about a $664,000 or $665,000 increase from the prior year. And that increase is primarily due to the impact of COVID-19. This is going to be one of the areas where you're going to see the impact of COVID-19 on the town's financial statements. In conjunction with the Commonwealth, interest and fees were deferred until June 30th, and then the town was unable to send late notices on their tax bills until I believe June 30th as well. So in the past, they were able to send at the beginning of the month, and then due to restrictions that were put on by the Commonwealth, they couldn't send them out to the end of the month, which is why you're seeing that increase in your receivable balance. This is pretty common with what we're seeing in other municipalities across the Commonwealth. We're seeing a slight uptick in that property tax receivables due to the town not being able to send out late notices and not being able to calculate interest and fees that were deferred until June 30th. The next item I'd like to bring to your attention is actually the opposite. It's actually 3 numbers from the bottom, and it is your unassigned fund balance, and that has a balance of $11,115,000, and this was pretty comparable to the prior year. It's about a $167,000 increase from the prior year. Now, this figure is one of the more important figures in the town's financial statements. This is essentially the starting point for the town's free cash calculation. As well, the town has a policy that requires this figure to be between 8 and 12% of the town's annual operating expenditures. And at June 30, 2020, that percentage was at 10.7%. So the town is right in line with the town policy, and the Governmental Finance Officers Association likes to see this figure between 8 and 16% of expenditures. So the town at 10.7% is right in line with not only the town's policy, but with where the GOFA would like to see it as well, which is a strong position for the town of Danvers to be in. This is a favorable position for the town of Danvers to be in.
Can I ask a quick question, Zach?
Sure.
I noticed that the hand is still up on Gardner's screen. I'm not sure if that's still up or if, Gardner, do you have a new question?
Nope.
Okay.
I assume he just left his hand up.
I just lowered it.
Thank you.
My magical hand lowering tool.
The next page I'd like to have you turn to is page 36. In page 36 is your general fund, essentially budget versus actual. There are 4 columns here. The very first one is your original budget. The second column is the town's final budget. That third column is the actual revenues or the actual expenditures that the town received or expended in fiscal year 20. And then that far right column, which is where I'd like to pay our attention, is the favorable, unfavorable variance when comparing the final budget to either the actual revenues or the actual expenditures. The very first one I'd like to bring to your attention is actually the very first line item. It's called property taxes. And that had an unfavorable variance of $647,000. Now, this is really comparable to that item that I talked about on page 32, where you saw an increase in your receivables for about $664,000. Now you're seeing a unfavorable variance of about $647,000. They're really intertwined, that there was a decrease, or excuse me, an increase in your receivable, and then you can see that what the town expected to bring in for property tax revenues was slightly less by about $647,000. That's primarily due, again, to the impacts of COVID-19. The next item I want to bring to your attention is actually 2 line items below it, your penalties, interest, and other taxes. And that had an unfavorable variance of $326,000. So when I say unfavorable variance, it's the amount of revenues that came in less than what was budgeted. And this was, again, primarily due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is another area where you're going to see the impact of that on the town's financial statements. This shortfall was primarily due to a decrease in the hotels and meals tax. And this was seen across the Commonwealth with a decrease in the restrictions that were imposed on hotels and restaurants, that there was a decrease in the revenue that was received for hotels and the meals tax. And again, this is right in line with other municipalities in the Commonwealth. So maybe about a third of the way down the page is your total revenues. And your total revenues had an unfavorable variance of about $226,000. This is the amount of revenue that came in less than what was anticipated by the town during the budgeting process. Now, on the flip side, the expenditures saw very favorable variances. If we go maybe 2/3 of the way down the page, you'll see total expenditures. And total expenditures had a favorable variance of $4,027,000. This represents the amount of expenditures that came in less than what was anticipated during the fiscal year 20. So if we come all the way to the bottom of the page, you'll see the very last line item is the excess of revenues and other sources over expenditures and other uses. And that has a total favorable variance for the town of $3,787,000. This represents the total combined between the revenues and the expenses that the town essentially beat the budget by. So that is a favorable position for the town to be in. And again, it's a positive figure for the town to have in their financial statements.
Zach, this is a fiscal year, so this is as of the end of June.
That's correct, Mr.
So
Chairman.
we're halfway through this pandemic year.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
We can expect similar variances in the budget numbers going forwards, I would assume.
Rodney, I'll let you take that one.
Thanks, Zach.
This is a pre-budget hearing question.
Yes, so, Mr. Chairman, so as part of the process, as we outlined during the financial summit, we've continuously reduced our estimates for those key revenue lines on the hotel and on the meal side, both from March, then in June when the budget was approved, right up until recap last month in December when we set the tax rate. So, knock on wood, we shouldn't see a variance as significant as the $326,000 pictured here in FY21, just because of the fact that we lowered our budgeted expectations going into FY21.
Thank you.
And
Dan,
Dan,
you had a question?
I do.
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to make a note that if you were to look in the last year's audit, our positive revenue variance, and we talk year after year about the relatively conservative approach we take on the revenue side of the budget. We had just under a $2 million positive variance in revenue last year, and we're looking at a negative $225,000 variance in revenue for the year that ended 3 months into the pandemic. So we continue to have major concerns about what the year that we're in, the 21 budget. You know, we have spent all 7 months so far of that budget year in the pandemic, and although we adjusted some of those revenue assumptions, we won't know until we get another quarter of actuals under our belt to see what the annualized impact is likely to be. We were very fortunate on the expenditure side this year, driven in part by some vacancies that we had in the public safety departments that we simply couldn't fill, under civil service timelines. Most importantly, we had a very mild winter. So 1.3 million of our positive spending variance was due to having very light snow operations last year. And we put a spending freeze in place toward the end of the fiscal year once we were into the pandemic. So it's a lot easier to slow down and control expenditures than it is to control the revenue coming in. And I would say going into the 22 process, Dan, that's where the concern is going to be, is on the revenue side.
Thank you. Gardner?
So thank you. I'm looking at the expenditures and, happy to see the variances, but just like I look at the revenues and see the $647,000 property taxes and the penalties are really a timing issue, which I suspect will be reconciled in some manner. It won't be as bad as it looks. My question about the expenditures is our variance is all positive, and like Public Works, $1.3 million, I'm presuming a bunch of that's just deferred projects we couldn't get to. Oh, no, it's not. Can you please explain?
No, most of that is due to the winter we had last year. Very light winter, so it's a lot. We take a 5-year rolling average for snow ops.
Well, then, then can you explain the next big number is public safety, and the one after that is employee benefits. How is it that we were positive, $897,000 on public safety and $675,000 on employee benefits? I realize we had some attrition, we didn't fill some slots, but that certainly couldn't have made that much of a $675,000 worth of impact.
So those are two separate. The benefits budget variance is separate from the public safety one. I think two things, and I'll have Rodney jump in. But on the public safety side, it's a combination of the vacancies. So when we have a retirement, unlike in other departments, we can't fill those positions in 6 weeks. We have to wait for classes, and we've had a lot of retirements in the public safety departments the last few years. Part of it too is that when a lot of projects slowed down in the spring, so a lot of overtime would have slowed down as well. So I think it's hard to tell. I'd have to go back and look at prior audits to see what the positive variance has been in public safety compared to this year. Benefits, I would ask Rodney to weigh in that we did, of course, make significant changes to the plan this past year, and I think part of it is the transition year to the new plan. But I don't know, Rodney, if you have more detail on that.
That would be part of it. Just circling back to public safety, most of that was on the police side, and just quickly looking at one of my spreadsheets, it looks like over 300,000 of it alone is just in salary and wages permanent on the police side. So again, outages that existed for a period of months generated significant surplus there. And then on the benefit side, one thing that we should mention is that the Medicare costs, so the rate for Medicare insurance, I think in calendar year 19 went slightly down. It may have been level funded in 20, but again, so that was some savings there that we don't know that rate until January, so we have to assume there's going to be an increase. And if there's not, that generates some savings as well.
Thank you. All set.
I think just to kind of, again, put a little bit of bow on it, Steve had mentioned earlier that in the prior year, the revenue was at about 1.8 million, or slightly below $2 million, favorable variance. Similar in the prior year, total expenditures was actually at a favorable variance of about $2.7 million. So certainly this year there was a $4 million favorable variance on expenditures, but last year there was about $2.7 million favorable variance on the expenditures, just to kind of add some context and some perspective there. That concludes everything I wanted to bring to your attention in the financial statement. Scott, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, are there any questions, or am I okay to move to the management letter? Or?
I see nobody's hand up. You can move forward.
So moving to the management letter. So in addition to proving out the balances in the town's financial statements, we also look at the town's internal controls to ensure that the assets of the towns are appropriately safeguarded. And if there were any areas where we thought that improvements could be made, we would recommend those here in a management letter. And if the issues were serious enough, we would either classify them as a significant deficiency, or we would classify them as a material weakness. And this year, the town did not have any material weaknesses, and the town did not have any significant deficiencies. If I could, I'd like to turn to page 3, which is actually the last page of the management letter. And there are 2 recommendations for the current year. The first one is to improve the cash reconciliation process, or excuse me, the cash reconciliation procedures. So what we're simply recommending here is that the town improve their cash reconciliation process to include the payroll account, and to ensure that the process for cash reconciliations are performed in a timely manner. The second comment, which is at the bottom of page 3, is to prepare for the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, statements number 84 and 87. And these are just, this is really just an FYI comment. It's not anything that the town has done incorrectly or needs to change. We just wanted to bring this to the town's attention that these are 2 accounting standards that need to be implemented by the town in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. And in speaking with Rodney and others in the town's not going to have any anticipated issues with the implementation of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board statements number 84 and number 87. Rodney's well aware of them, and he and his team are more than ready to implement both of those.
So Rodney, give me some example of leases, operating leases.
So we see a lot of leases in the IT department, so leasing equipment, there would be an example. Printers, we're starting to get more leaning towards leasing our printers and copiers versus buying them outright. Those would be included. We talked a little bit this past spring about lease to purchase agreements. Those are becoming more popular and things that we can take advantage of, in which we pay it over 3 years or so, and then we own the item versus just buying it outright. So those would be several examples.
Buses?
Yep, buses.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with questions on the management letter? No. Zach, are you all set? Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd just like to have just one more second to speak, if that would be okay with
Please,
you.
take your time.
I think just a quick conclusion and a takeaway from my presentation should be that the town is in a good financial position. The town has a strong unassigned fund balance and had positive turnbacks in total on the budget versus actual. So I really think that should be the takeaway from our presentation. And again, I want to thank everybody here again for all their hard work with the audit. As I had mentioned at the beginning, it was a unique audit year. So again, we want to thank everybody involved with the audit. It was a pleasure to work with the individuals here in the town of Danvers.
Thank you, Scott and Zach, for the presentation and the work, doing it remotely. And I want to mention that our Heather Varney and Jill Summit, this is your first year, and thank you for the work that you did to put this together, and glad to hear that we're in good financial straits. And thank you, Rodney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have a good night, everybody.
All right,
Thank you.
be well, stay safe.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I could ask through you to the town manager, part of my, for 15 years, the best part of this book, the thick one, I like the management letter, but the thick one is the last section, the statistical section. I know you've put this document in PDF form on the website. Can you break out and just put the statistical section as a PDF alone? Because it's amazing how much information about the town is right there. Our population, our trending. There's just so much wealth of information about the town of Danvers that it almost should be part of the welcome packet we have. It's not, the financial information, great, is important, very important, but there's a lot of depth in this one section from page 129 on.
thank you, Gardner.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to say, Dan, Bernard, Maureen Bernard, I also like seeing, thank you for all the hard work, Rodney and Heather and everybody, the last 10 fiscal years. I love that. That really gives me a really good sense of where we are today, where we were before, and where we need to go in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a document that during the year I refer to it, Gardner, like you say, if you need have a question, that's the place to look. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Thank you all. The board will consider adoption of recently reviewed and amended traffic rules and order. Mr. Town Manager, I assume Mr. Aaron Henry is here?
He is, and he is happy to be with us tonight. I know secretly he's hoping we will not approve them because he's enjoying these meetings, and we can keep him coming back as long as we keep this process open. But in all seriousness, he is back. You did receive a clean copy of the traffic rules incorporating all of the, I guess, what we would describe as simple changes. I'm stealing some of his thunder, but you've heard him speak a couple times on this topic. This project started mostly as a reformatting and housekeeping and reorganization of the document. There are obviously some changes that we've discussed in prior meetings. A few items came up during the process that will require circling back with DTAC to take a closer look at. And just as a reminder, adoption tonight won't be the end of the process here, because this is a living document that can be updated at any time after proper notice and public hearing. But with that, I would turn it over to Aaron, who I know is prepared to provide an additional update and walk you through any questions.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome.
Steve did an excellent job of summarizing kind of where we are. We started with a preliminary review in November. That generated probably the most comments that I saw throughout this process. And again, that was probably 6 months of DTAC going over this to get to your first November meeting. I know Mr. Clark gave me 41 comments at that meeting. I think 39 of them got worked into the document. As Steve alluded to, there are some policy questions that aren't necessarily for the clean copy, but things that we as DTAC and your staff need to double back on. The December meeting, a lot less comments. We had, I think, specifically some comments on funeral processions. I apologize, there was some angled parking comments. I think there were just some technical things that we were looking to correct. And we also had a little bit of a back and forth with Mr. Duggan over overnight parking and the rules, and we were able to incorporate almost all of those. I'm just hearing some feedback.
Aaron, I've muted everybody, but if you can unmute yourself and continue, I'm hoping that'll take care of the feedback.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. So after the December meeting, I did have another round of back and forth with Mr. Duggan, and I think most of what we've discussed made it into the draft. There was a little bit that I think we need to double back with DTAC and Mr. Duggan on. So, and as Mr. Bartha alluded to, I plan on coming back really every 6 months. There may not be a rule change necessary for the board to deal with every 6 months, but I think to Mr. Clark's point about the role of the select board as traffic commissioners, I want to do a better job of getting to you repeatedly or a few more times a year. So I expect to see me in probably the June timeframe. And again, these policy issues that got raised, I'd like to spend the spring looking at and try to come back in that June timeframe with some of our findings and further conversation. So before you tonight is what I think is an adoptable final version of the traffic rules and orders. I do apologize. I found at least a typo in the memo that I gave you, and I apologize for finding at least one when I looked at it the other day in horror. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Dan, I'd like to. Oops, excuse me.
Hi. So two things that I would see, not seeing. Well, one thing. One is on site issues. I think we talked about in the last meetings. If someone has hedges or building or some other manner of obstruction that you can't see from a intersection. And by the way, that's not me. I don't know where that's coming from. I think that has to be addressed. The other is in section 6, overnight parking. No drivers may park a tow truck of any weight or any vehicle having a gross vehicle weight of more than 14,000 pounds of any type between the hours 1 and 6. I have two issues about this I'd like to see addressed. One is, I'm not sure why we're specifically calling out tow trucks. I mean, I think it should be any commercial vehicles. And the other is, I think it should be, and I think actually it should say, or any commercial vehicle having a gross weight. I have friends who love to camp. And if you go to the Winnebago site and you look up a Winnebago camper, the smallest one they have is over 14,000 pounds, 14,000 pounds weight. So you've got a legitimate person with a vehicle that's not a commercial vehicle unable to park in front of their house. So I think that should actually, I would just say, or any commercial vehicle, insert the word commercial right, midway through that first line. I just think it's and I'm just not sure why we're specifically calling out tow trucks. I think it should be any commercial vehicle, if that's the intent we have. I understand it, and I think it would solve the issue with the big Tedesco truck that was in the town parking lot for a long time or on the streets. But I just, both those things caught my eye. One is, why are we calling out tow trucks, and why are we, there are legitimate reasons to have a personal vehicle of that size. I'll go on mute so I don't cause any of that echo.
Yeah, for my sake, again, the tow truck insert was a result of some of the back and forth with the DTAC regulars. But I think, to your point, if I'm understanding your proposal, replacing a tow truck with a commercial vehicle is acceptable. It accomplishes what the proponents were looking for to accomplish. So I'm not opposed. And I think, again, just to clarify, I want to make sure that this is saying that no vehicle of over that can park overnight. So is that your concern, Mr. Trask, was that I may have an RV and I want to put it in front of the house for the weekend or whatever that I've rented it and
Right, or I might be renting a U-Haul because I'm moving on Monday.
Yeah.
They're legit. Now that one's kind of on the border because it's a commercial vehicle, but an RV.
No, but I understand what you're. Yeah. Well, I'm certainly willing to take the will of the board here. I mean, so basically, I think as you understood it, you would say no driver may park any commercial vehicle having a gross vehicle weight rating of more than 14,000 pounds.
Yes, that would be, yes. If I could craft it, that's how I would, yes.
Okay.
Oh, if I may, Aaron, I'm adamant that tow truck stays in. I don't want to hold this up tonight on a vote, but I would like the ability to speak to it at a DTAC meeting for the DTAC to make a decision on the tow trucks.
So hearing the chairman's concerns, and I think it needs more vetting because you already did vet it at the DCAT. I have no problem leaving it in for now in simply inserting or any commercial vehicle having a gross weight. Just put the word commercial in halfway down that line. No driver may park a tow truck of any weight or any commercial vehicle having a gross weight.
I think when we vote on it, Gardner, that would be acceptable if it is to the board.
Okay.
Are you set? Thank you. Bill?
Can you hear me now? Try this right. Can you hear me now?
I hear you, Bill.
Okay. Aaron, I've only got one thing tonight, not 41 or 31, whatever. It's on page 45. It's on page 45. The town-owned sites and parking areas. I think there's an oversight in that one of our parking areas was not listed on this list. And it's a site that's a municipal off-street site off Maple Street behind where Chuck's Roast Beef is. And I was going to look up the numbers of Maple Street. I don't forget the number of it. But you go in, you enter it between the Maple Street Senior Citizen Center and then the Chuck's Roast Beef. And that lot is not on here. And I do believe we bought that land many years ago.
Yep.
Two different landowners.
You are good catch.
Oh, that's good. Haven't gotten too much Alzheimer's yet, then. Huh? That's good.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
David?
Thank you, Dan. I think that Aaron and his colleagues, as usual, have done an absolutely splendid job of sorting out and simplifying town administrative. So, congratulations. My continuing concern is that the regulations. I don't know. Is somebody's microphone on that shouldn't be on?
I think it's Bill's, and I think it's been muted. For some reason, when Bill is speaking, there's no feedback, but if his mic is open and someone else speaks, we catch the feedback. So we're keeping an eye on that.
All right, thank you, Steve. I'm just in favor of the town's ability to utilize less expensive traffic monitors as they do in New Hampshire for certain traffic matters that should not be locked into expensive police rates. And when I look at Section 1 of Article 2, I think that continues to lock in it excludes the option of lose. By the way, funny thing, there's no exemption in here for the school crossing guards who indeed direct traffic and are not police officers. And so Article 2, Section 1, which seems to make all traffic enforcement and direction in the town to be police matters, I really don't think that's practical. I don't think it's cost effective. And now that I think about it, I guess it doesn't coincide with our utilization of guards crossing school walks, which indeed direct traffic in Danvers. So. We talked about this a couple months ago, and I forget where we left it. Maybe it was for me to just keep my mouth shut. I'm not exactly sure what the,
Was that a viable strategy?
well, I think it was maybe the consensus of my colleagues on the board. I don't know.
For
So,
myself,
yeah,
that was
yeah,
one of the issues
Excuse
similar
me,
to
I think the
sightlines.
crossing guards are under the purview of the police department.
I think that's one of those policy issues that I'd like to be able to itemize. I think there was sight lines, there was a couple of other issues, some particular speed limit signs, speed limit questions. I'm going to kind of collate that, return to DTAC over the next couple of months, and return to you, as I said, probably in that June timeframe with hopefully a little bit more information on this topic and several other policy topics.
And Aaron, I would suggest we, part of the answer to David's question, I believe, has to do with legislation that was passed years ago related to police details and the rate of pay for those. So I think we'd want to loop in either Captain Lovell or Acting Chief Tansey into that conversation so that we understand what the Mass General Law implications are for that. But I think it's something, David, I don't think anybody was suggesting it's not worthy of discussion. I think we just need to bring some more voices to the table at DTAC to take a look at it.
I didn't mean as I was, it's just that at my age, Steve, I don't remember everything that has happened. But Dan's comment, I think, is very important. If the school crossing guards are within the jurisdiction and supervision of the police department, citizens who are non-police officers could be directing traffic in emergency situations under the direction of the police department as well, and perhaps that solves my concern. It's just that if there's a cheaper, safe way to do it, my constituency, and of course I'm the oldest man here. My constituency wishes that we would do it in the most cheap, efficient, and safe way.
I know there are other towns out there that have addressed this. I think it was the Municipal Modernization Act that had that language in it. I remember in my prior post that coming out, so we will look into that and we will return to the board with that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Bill, your hand is well set.
I've got a comment about that that I have been mute about the last several meetings, but I think there's a piece of information that we might know. I remember that I was wanting to back the same thing, and when they tried it up at Center Street under Route 1 for the traffic directors were not getting paid the big rate, and I believe it was the Teamsters that took it to court in the state and won a decision that because of the prevailing wage law, that they had jurisdiction of these people, and the prevailing wage was the police rate plus Blue Cross plus Social Security, and the rates for people that were not police was actually more than the police rate. You may want to check into that, because there was a person who's an organizer for Teamsters in Danvers who actually, I think he's the one who told me about this, that they had won a court case on this in the state.
Good intel, thank you.
So if everybody's all set, can we have a motion to adopt the amended traffic rules and orders with the suggestions made tonight?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move we adopt the presented traffic conditions with the change on off-street parking. I'm just looking it up again. It's on page 7. To change it to no drivers may park a tow truck of any weight or any commercial vehicle, adding the word commercial there, having a gross vehicle weight, and the remainder of the statement.
That's your motion?
That's my motion.
Thank you, Gardner. Is there a second?
Second, Mills.
Second, Mills. Thank you. We'll call for a vote. Clark?
He's on mute.
Is this vote on the amendment?
It's on the adoption as amended.
I also want to get that parking lot included in it on
I believe Gardner
Maple Street.
I'm I apologize. I will minute that. I'll include that as part of my motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second,
Clark?
yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Mills?
Yes.
Trask? And the chair as well. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Looking forward to seeing you in June.
Thank you all. Have a great night. Happy New Year.
Thank you,
Well,
too.
don't worry, we'll have him back before June.
I'm sure. I'm just
We have
thinking
lots
that.
going on in land use that he'll be updating us on.
The board will vote to reappoint members to various boards and committees. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, while Aaron is still on, I'll note one omission from the memorandum that went out to the board on Friday is Aaron's appointment to the Beverly Airport Commission. We had, Ann was doing some research after the memo went out and realized Aaron is completing his first term on that board. As you'll recall, we've always balanced our 2 seats there with somebody from on staff, with somebody from the community. And it appears that when Karen Nelson was the appointee, we weren't consistent in reappointing her as her term came due, but Ann correctly brought that up to our attention and sent an email to me and Dan today. So in addition to the names in the memo, we would be adding Aaron's name here for a reappointment as one of the 2 representatives to the airport committee. Otherwise, the names on this form speak for themselves. They represent these are not vacancies. These are current members who are up for reappointment. We do have some additional vacancies, both known and anticipated, that we'll need to bring back to the board in the months ahead. But this document is really the routine reappointments of board-appointed board and committee members.
So everybody has the memo. We should take these one at a time. The first is the Committee for Human Rights and Inclusion, scheduled for reappointment, D. Djoko and Charles Desmond. Is there a motion?
I move that they be further reappointed to the commission, and it's becoming a very, very important committee and commission, and these fellows add an awful lot to it. Thank you.
So motion to reappoint by Mills. Is there a second?
Trask, second.
Second. Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll. Bill?
I have him muted again, Dan, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Bill?
Still muted.
Is it okay? I just hit unmuted.
You're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Maureen?
Yes.
Trask?
Yes.
Mills?
Yes.
And the chairman as well. The next is the Board of Registrars. Mark Lentini is eligible for reappointment for another 3-year term. Is there a motion?
Trask, motion.
Is there a second? Who's that?
Clark, second.
Mills? Thank you. Any
Yes.
comment, any conversation? Hearing none. Maureen?
Yes.
Mills?
Yes.
Trask?
Yes.
Clark?
That was a yes, Dan, but he's muted again, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, he gave you a chance to unmute him. And
I don't-
No, you know what? He hits it, I hit it both.
I don't think I can unmute him, I can only mute him.
All right.
Am I muted now?
Nope, you're not, but stay there.
It says I'm muted, so whatever.
We can hear you. So the next one is added Aaron Henry, Board Commission. Is this a 3-year term, Steve?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Motion.
Second, Clark.
Who was the first?
Trask.
Yes, we'll take a roll. Mills?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Trask?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
And the chairman as well. So mute everybody, myself.
I think it's just Bill, so Bill's muted again.
Now, okay. So the next one is the Zoning Board of Appeals. Bob Signetti is sent in, is going to retire after 26 years as ZBA member. And to get the board back in some sense of continuity, if we appoint two people for a 3-year term and one person to a 1-year term, we'll get to a point where we have 2 every year to reappoint going forwards. 2 in 22, 2 in 23, and 2 in 24. And I think that makes sense. So we have eligible for appointment, reappointment, Rebecca Kilborn, Kenneth Scholes, and Kenneth Jarvin is eligible for reappointment as well. So I'm looking for a motion for these appointments.
Mr. Chairman, I move we reappoint Rebecca Kilburn for the 3-year period, Kenneth Scholes for the 3-year period, and Kenneth Jarvin for the 2-year period.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by.
Bernard.
Dan, may I ask you
a question?
Yes.
I heard you say 3, 3, and 1.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
I believe Gardner's motion was 3, 3, and 2.
I apologize. 3, 3, and 1.
So can we have another motion from somebody?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that, that the board approve the reappointment of Becky Kilborn for a 1-year term to expire in January of 2022. I think that would be consistent with our overall goals of overlap. And also, yeah, because I think that would be best in the town's interests.
Well,
So your motion is to appoint Kilborn 1 year, Scholes and Jarvin 3 years?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, time out. There was a motion and it was seconded, and I corrected it to make Jarvin the 1 year. I don't know if that just went away or not.
Well, you made a motion that was incorrect, and Mr. Miller
Right.
stepped in with another motion.
Okay, fine. I corrected the motion. I was looking to, if we're having comment on it, I was looking at Kenneth Jarvin is moving up from alternate, and it seemed more appropriate that he would take the 1 year and then immediately, hopefully, be appointed to 3 years right after that. Becky, who's been serving all along, has been on a 3-year cycle the whole time. So the only reason I picked one over the other is because one's an alternate coming up.
So we have a motion from David. Is there a second to David's motion? Hearing none, then we'll look for another motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we appoint Rebecca Kilborn for 3 years, Kenneth Scholes for 3 years, and Kenneth Jarvin for 1 year.
Is there a second?
Second. Bernard.
Thank you. Comments, conversation? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call. Clark?
Billy, you have to unmute. I think he's trying, Mr. Chairman.
I'm trying, and I think Steve's sitting at the same time I am.
I'm not. I have my hand off the trigger.
We hear you.
Okay, yes.
Bernard?
Yeah.
Trask?
Yes.
Mills?
No,
Bennett? No. It passes 3-2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ann will prepare the appropriate letters, and as I had indicated, we do have some other vacancies that we will be bringing back to the board in the months to come. On human rights and inclusion, we also will have 2 vacancies. We had 1 vacancy on the ZBA with Bob's retirement and Kenneth's promotion as a regular from alternate. We'll have 2 alternate seats on the ZBA. So we will be working through the talent pool book and the folks we know, and I would encourage any board members who have candidates that they think would be a good fit on these boards, share those names with us, and we can have the staff liaisons to those groups reach out for an interview of sorts. So I appreciate the reappointments tonight so we can keep doing the town's work.
Thank you. See, before you continue, I just want the board to know that Ann prepared a letter for me to sign to send to Mr. Signetti for his 26 years of service,
That's
Very nice.
as well as to Don Gates, who stepped down from the Affordable Housing Trust. Was that last month, Gardner?
Yes, it was.
Right, so we'll send a letter to him as well from the board. And then the town manager will report to the board on various items of interest. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a number of items I'd like to update the board on tonight. I'd like to start with some updates related to COVID. And I'm going to have some of there's some information here that's in an email. So if you'll bear with me for a second, I just want to pull that email up so that I have it in front of me. And for start, you'll know you received an update last week, and I know information has been public that the town completed a vaccination clinic for first responders. This was conducted in Marblehead and Beverly last week. Danvers Public Health Departments worked together, and we formed a regional group to run our clinic. Danvers, Salem, Beverly, Swampscott, and Marblehead worked together. And we had permission to administer up to 1,000 vaccines. I believe just over 700 first responders received vaccines last week at one of the 5 sites. I haven't seen the refined numbers yet, but roughly 80% of our police and firefighters were vaccinated at the sites last week. And related to that, we've been getting information. The state is actively looking for a site, quite possibly in Danvers. I know they're in some pre-planning stages right now for one of the mass vaccination sites that'll be launched in the weeks ahead. And so any first responder who was not vaccinated during the 5-day clinic last week will have an opportunity moving forward if they were either unavailable or had opted not to take the vaccine, and should they later change their mind, we will have other options. But I would note Aaron and Jen and Mark Carleo and in particular Judith Ryan have been doing yeoman's work with both coordinating the vaccine clinic, but also with the community testing that has been taking place in December and January. We do have a few more dates on the calendar for the free testing that the town has been offering. We have dates actually tomorrow and then on the 27th and the 28th. And we have some information on the website for how residents can register for one of those 3 testing dates. And then I think also related to COVID, you may have seen on social media today, I believe, Jen has launched something in partnership with the small business community, Takeout Tuesdays. So that splashed on social media today, and it's so far been well received, but we'd like to try to help promote each week restaurants for takeout. As we all know at this point, the pandemic has been particularly hard on our small businesses and restaurants and bars. It does look like there may be additional congressional legislation coming this spring to try to help small businesses. But this is one small thing, in addition to the license modifications that the board has provided and the flexibility that they've allowed for staff to work with license holders, and obviously waiving the license fees in December for liquor license holders. Helping to promote these businesses is one small thing we can do using the platform we have on social media. So that I'm happy to report that out. I want to mention, just briefly, there have been a couple of major pieces of legislation that have been signed by the governor in the past couple of weeks. The economic development bill, which included the housing choices language that we've been talking about for a couple of years, was signed by the governor. So that will reduce the town meeting threshold for a number of our zoning articles, which in years past have required a 2/3 majority, including the recent rezoning we passed in February for our downtown, to a simple majority. So that's one of the key pieces of the legislation. There are a lot of moving parts in that legislation. I've seen a rough cut today from Aaron and David Fields to look kind of section by section what this bill means, but we'll have a more refined summary for the board at one of our upcoming meetings. Also, the police reform bill that was signed by the governor. I have seen a number of quick synopses of the bill. I haven't seen anything detailed from the MMA yet. I know that Captain Lovell and Acting Chief Tansey are getting updates through their associations too. But that's a big piece of legislation that's going to require a lot of analysis, both from within the organization, but also probably some legal review as well, to make sure that we understand what the requirements and implications of that are going to be locally. The governor did veto a climate bill within the past week that had been passed by the House and Senate. So I think quite clearly we've not heard the end of that, but obviously there were some issues in that bill that the governor was not comfortable with. So I imagine that will be taken back to the various branches for refinement. And related to that, we're working on the budget. Departments have all submitted their budgets. We had our preliminary budget team meeting with schools and library last week. As was indicated during the audit portion of the call, revenue remains the biggest variable for us. And at this point, we expect the governor will release his draft 22 budget probably at the end of the month. Typically, we see that in the fourth Wednesday of the month. So either last week in January or possibly the first couple of days in February, we'll see a summary of what that includes. At this point, we're anticipating level funding for local aid, but the state is in a similar position as we are, sort of watching and waiting to see federally what happens. So we'll have a lot more to say and discuss on that front. But the process is certainly underway in the background. Just briefly, I'm assuming you've seen the various emails related to the MMA annual meeting, which is going to take place virtually at the end of this week, Thursday, Friday. If you go to the MMA website, mma.org, it's not too late to register if you'd like to participate in that event. There will be a series of keynote speakers, including the Lieutenant Governor on Thursday and the Governor on Friday, and a number of workshops on a variety of topics, ranging from the fiscal outlook to managing virtually, to public health, to diversity, you name it. So there's a lot of great content. And again, if you go to mma.org, you should be able to find information about the annual meeting, as well as a link to register if you still wish to do that. And the final two updates tonight are both somber. Everybody knows at this point about the untimely passing of Chief Ambrose, who retired less than 2 weeks ago after 35 years of service to the town. And I know each of the board members would like to share some thoughts about Pat. And I certainly have communicated with staff and with some of the media outlets, but it's a big loss, and it's a big hole in the community. Pat was he was a friend, and he was a mentor. He was an advisor to me, and I really relied on him. He was a steady, strong presence, and I know a lot of people are grieving right now, and will probably grieve for some time. And I wanted to mention that on Thursday, there will be at the Peterson O'Donnell Funeral Home an opportunity for the public to pay their respects. I know Captain Lovell and Acting Chief Tansey have been working closely with the family. There will be a private service on Friday, but on Thursday from 3 to 7, there will be hours so that folks who wish to come, it'll be a socially distanced opportunity to come through, say goodbye. And so I wanted to share that both with the board and anybody who may be listening. And another Danvers lost this week. We got word that former town attorney Mike Lehane, who had represented this town for many years, passed away at the age of 79. He and I did not overlap. David DeLuca was the town attorney when I arrived in 2014, but I had the chance to meet Mike a couple of times at the annual town meeting, annual business meeting of the MMA. And in the stories told about him and in the opinions that I've been able to pull out of the files and read, he was obviously a very funny, very brilliant attorney who I think represented the town well. And I know a lot of the folks on this call probably had the chance to work with Mike when he was still with the town. So a couple of big losses this week for the town of Danvers. That's all that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Can we have a motion on the consent calendar?
So moved, as presented.
Yes.
Second, Mills.
Second, is that Bill?
Mills, second.
Thank you. We'll take a roll. David?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Yes.
Clark? And the chair as well. Thank you. So the last item on the agenda is correspondence, selectmen new business, previous new public business update, selectmen's closing comments. Unless somebody has something pertinent, I think we'll go right to closing comments, and we'll start with Bill.
Hold on, Bill.
Can you hear me now all right?
Yeah.
You can, okay, thank you. I'm shocked about Mike Lahane. I just heard it, not tonight, just with us, from Steve. Mike was a great guy. He worked very closely with a lot of us, and he gave us a lot of great opinions, and he's a big loss for our history. I just wanted to speak about Pat for a second. I first met Pat as a freshman in high school, and I was fortunate to have him for 2 years in class. He was a very interesting student, very highly motivated, and I was very proud to see him rise through the ranks in the police department, and I'm also so proud to see his son on the plot department as well, making the third successive generation after Pat's father, John. And I feel very sorry for Wendy and the kids, and I please extend my sympathies to them. And it was a shock when Steve called me that Pat had passed. It's a shame. It's just not fair. It's too bad. He just had 4 days, and that's all. And I feel bad because I've known Pat, and he retired about the same age that I did, and I've been able to enjoy 20 great years since then, and he got cheated out of it. It's just a shame.
Thank you, Bill. David?
Thank you. A couple of things. Pat and I go back a long time. We took scuba diving lessons together in the YMCA 40 years ago. We both qualified, by the way. I don't know if he ever went scuba diving again. I didn't. But we maintained a very good friendship. Pat was shy. Pat was not effusive. So it was not, Pat was not a really terribly outgoing, but we always trusted and respected one another. And I want to say that Pat, from the time that he was the chief up until his death, he was a real champion for inclusion and the diversity committee. And I think that he was the, next to the town hall, the rainbow flag at the police department was the second municipal rainbow flag in Danvers. And I will always thank him and respect him for his commitment to inclusion, to human rights, and to that stuff that's so important to me. Mike Lahane, I remember when Mike Lahane came to the town. He came as a real grown-up, and having a grown-up, manage the legal matters of the town was very important at that time. And I also, when I was working in my other job as a judge, from time to time, Mike Lahane would come up to the court and argue, and I'll tell you something, there was a very fine and committed lawyer, and I've lost track with him, but when I heard of his passing, I was really saddened. He was a good man and a good lawyer. I also would like to note that Steve and Jen came out, I think today, with the latest of the newsletters, primarily the intramural newsletter for employees, which we're included in. And wow, what a wonderful, comprehensive, affirming document that is. And I want to say that's really important to me, that people be affirmed and recognized for what they're doing for the town, because applause is cheap, but it doesn't happen all the time. So thank you for doing that beautiful job. I also want to mention that as far as the Police Reform Act, Paula Carey, the chief judge of the trial court in Massachusetts, has issued a memorandum to all judges. That's like 400 trial court judges under her supervision. I have read part of it and I'm continuing. It's a very balanced, scholarly document. If anyone wants a readable explanation of a take on that reform bill, just send me a note and give me your email address and I can send that out to you. The other thing is that the Inclusion and Human Rights Commission, we did the Martin Luther King celebration online this year, and it was a magnificent production. And kudos to the committee, kudos to everybody who worked on that, to Eileen Page, who is kind of a liaison from administration to the committee, and to the DTAC people. I've heard all kinds of wonderful response, and despite the fact that we weren't in person this year, it was really well respected. I also want to mention that the Inclusion Committee has published a poster, a yard poster for unity in our community. It's on my fence. I have on each side of my fence in front of my house. It's up there. We've had a hard time getting them out into the community because of COVID. And I'm sorry that I didn't bring it. I will, for our next meeting, send to Jen a picture of it that maybe will be suitable for posting on our next meeting. And finally, I was so surprised. I think that our administration is superb, and Jen was manning she was personalizing. Jen was giving me my instructions on a COVID test. I went down on an afternoon around 5:30, and there's Jen in a raincoat out there. I'm saying, wait a second, did you really sign on for this? And there she is, directing traffic and helping our employees. I asked if I qualified as an employee, and she said that I did. So I went and I got tested. But another thing that she does, and I just think that the things that our town people do for our town and for each other is really extraordinary, and I am grateful. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. I'm just to tie in with that, Dr. Dana was there giving out the forms to fill out the night I went. Dr. Dana. So there you go. Employees really pitch in.
Well, doctors should be there. I mean, you'd expect a doctor to be there, right?
She's not a medical doctor. Thank you, David. Maureen?
Yes, I just want to extend my sincere sympathies to Wendy and the kids. I've known both Pat and Wendy for a long time, living in this community, growing up in this community. I've worked with Wendy for many years, so my heart goes out to them, especially all the kids and their youngest son, Aiden, too, who I really got to know through the Smith School. I also want to mention that as this town is, comes together with this passing, that the Brookline Bank has put together a gift card album for anybody that would like to make a contribution in what they're doing. It can be dropped off at the Brookline Bank at 107 High Street, and they'll be presenting that to Wendy because she did work at Brookline Bank, but it's a big loss in town. Sorry.
Thank you, Maureen. Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So each of us has personal remembrances based on our interactions. I really respected Pat for the consummate professional he was, and I know how prideful he was of the police department, of his of the people who work with him, for him in the police department, and how he respected them, and he in turn. And it'll be a tremendous loss. I mean, retiring and then and so swiftly going is heartbreaking. And condolences to the family and his family at the police department as well. Also, didn't hear about Mike Lehane until just now. I can recall Mike for years being the attorney when I was a selectman, and remember most at every MMA he would be pulling people left and right into the they had a function at the first night of the MMA usually from Toomey, Hess, and Lehane, and he'd just be pulling people into that, and I really enjoyed he had a wonderful wit. I really enjoyed that. So I'm sorry for the loss, to the town of Danvers and to the Ambrose family. Thank you.
Thank you, Gardner. Just a little housekeeping business, Steve. You sent out a memo was sent out on the annual town election. And on the bottom, it says the town clerk's office is open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, some hours. But I don't think you are open. I think it's by appointment only. So would you look at that memo and see what we can do to get the proper information out?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'm glad you mentioned that. I was motioning to, I realized I had forgotten to mention that under the manager update, and we have Kathy on the call. I don't know if Kathy wants to speak to that, but I was going to mention that the nomination papers will become available February 1st. But Kathy, did you want to address Dan's question about the hours in the clerk's office?
Sure. Yeah, this is a draft document, so I was waiting till we got a little bit closer. So I was going to post this on the website with the caveat that at this time, we are not open to the public and to have people contact me directly. One of the things that I put on there as well, for example, at the top, ballot placement is going to be on March 25th. And I put to check the website because generally the location is Town Hall in the Toomey Room. Last year we had to do that virtually. So it's a little hard to pin things down at this point. So I will make that a little more clear.
Yeah, you're right. It is a draft, but I just want to see that we get the proper information out. It's important. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other change on the draft would be the deadline for filing papers. The draft says 4 p.m. on the 23rd. I'm going to adjust that to 5 p.m.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
My condolences to Pat's family. Pat served the community for 35 years in an exemplary manner. And was so sorry to hear that right after he retired, he passed away at 57. That is a tragedy, and my condolences to his family. I did want to make a statement. As local officials, our role is to provide services and support for our citizens and employees. We have been challenged in the last year by the pandemic, divisive politics, widespread unemployment, business failures, and increasing potential for homelessness. Many of these challenges has put undue pressure on our staff to provide essential services in a safe and efficient manner. I thank our employees, the town manager, and the 777 under his purview or nearly, for being supportive of our citizens and making an effort to provide for a stable and safe environment in our community. Thank you all. At this time, if there's no other business to come before the board, I see no hands up. The meeting is adjourned. Good night, Danvers. See you on February 5th at 5:30.
Good night. Thank you.
Or February 2nd, excuse me, Tuesday, February 2nd, 5:30. Good night, Danvers.
Thank you.